We're just going to get started, and if people trickle in, that's okay. Thanks for coming today, everyone. This is the last brown bag lecture in the Spring Mansfield Center lecture series. So thanks for being here. We're really excited to discuss this experience that we just went through last month, March. I also, just a little Mansfield Center business for any students who are interested in the Mansfield Center's Winter Session in Vietnam course. This is the last week to apply and save $500, is that right? So if you want more information, we have some little brochures on the winter session at the end of the table you can pick up when you leave. Or if you want to talk to someone about the experience, you can talk to Caitlin Sager, who's our administrative assistant at the Mansfield Center. Okay, so my name is Mel Wardlow. I'm a program manager for the Mansfield Center here at the university, and I generally work with international fellowship and exchange programs. So this year I had the privilege of being involved in, I still have the privilege of being involved in a Sports United program, which is, it's a program sponsored by the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. And it's part of the State Department's portfolio of sports diplomacy programs. So these are programs that they employ sports as a vehicle for promoting cultural exchange. So this particular program that this team that's here today experienced is a Sports United exchange between Laos and the United States. So the broad goals of the program, where's my little marker? The broad goals of the program are to use sports and physical education to empower youth and engage in environmental literacy. And so this particular program also has a very specific focus on youth with disabilities and ethnic minorities. And there are a couple of different reasons for this. To this day, Laos remains the most heavily bombed country in the world per capita, and this is largely in part to due in part to the Vietnam War. So this is a map of Laos, and then the red, where you see the red dots, that is where the country was most heavily bombed during this very extensive but pretty little known bombing campaign by the American military during the Vietnam War. This bombing campaign was largely intended to disrupt Vietnamese supply routes during the war, lasted for many years. It's estimated that about 30% of the bombs that were dropped during this time did not detonate. And so the country still to this day has a large amount of unexploded ordnance, what we call UXO, that is still affecting the population there, especially in rural areas. Mostly agricultural workers on a daily basis are encountering unexploded ordnance, and that has resulted in a large portion of the population living with disabilities, and it's still a large problem. And so this is one of the primary groups of people that this program is intended to support. Laos is also home to several ethnic minority populations that are still fairly marginalized, both socially, culturally, definitely politically, and so that is another group of people that this program intends to support. So like I mentioned, the Sports United program is a two-way professional exchange program. We have a team of 6 people from Montana who were selected for their areas of professional expertise to travel to Laos for 2 weeks in March of this year. So during their trip, they spent time in Vientiane, which is the capital city of Laos, and they also spent time in the rural province of Xieng Quang, which is in the north, one of those really the regions heavily affected by the bombing campaign in the north there, the northeast of the country. So in each of these locations, the American team had an opportunity to facilitate professional development workshops for Lao people with similar professional goals. And so this included sports professionals, people who work with youth, those who work specifically with populations with disabilities, and people who work with ethnic minorities. And so it was a time to participate in different activities together, to share professional ideas, and to engage in a very specific type of cultural exchange. And then in October of this year, we will welcome a group of 8 Lao professionals to Montana who will experience the second part of the exchange here in the United States. So we have our 6 American participants here today to share some of their experiences. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then I will have some specific questions for them to help facilitate this discussion, and then we'll also save some time towards the end of the talk for any questions from you, from the audience. Okay, so with that, I think we'll just get started. Shireen, can you start us out?
Sure. My name is Shireen Ricky, and I live here in Missoula. I got the privilege of being on this trip mostly in part from my affiliation with Missoula City Parks and Recreation, and I work with them kind of part-time in the summer months and facilitate day trips for people, a lot of times people with disabilities, adults, children, and people with all abilities. And I do some other fun stuff too.
My name is Paul Phillips. I work at SKC College. I manage a fitness center, teach a couple classes, and teach and demonstrate native games.
My name is Brett Taylor, and I am an outdoor recreation specialist, among other things, and have done a lot of work taking people with disability out, doing outdoor recreational activities, as well as a lot of other different types of people. I've also done a lot of work with youth sports, coaching, refereeing, volunteering, personal training, certified exercise physiologist, and do other work in health and wellness, along with youth group facilitation stuff. And that's about it.
Well, and my name is James Lostman. I'm a professor of physical therapy on campus here. I started off as a physical education teacher in adapted physical education, and have spent just over 25 years working with athletes with disabilities, so particularly Paralympic athletes, so mostly wheelchair basketball, track, swimming. And my research area is people with disability and chronic illness, and my lab actually houses the New Directions Wellness Center, which serves people with disability and chronic illness in our community in Missoula.
I'm Samantha McLeod. I live in Great Falls now, but I'm a recent grad. I'm a social worker at the hospital in Great Falls, but was selected to be part of this trip because I've worked with Special Olympics for about 10 years doing youth leadership trainings for students with and without disabilities.
And my name's Leanne Dolly Powell. I'm the Vice President of Unified Strategy for Special Olympics Montana. I've worked for Special Olympics Montana for 5 years in the capacity of unified sports, supporting youth volunteers, supporting volunteers, and I have worked internationally with Special Olympics International on a few U.S.-China exchanges, as well as went with Paul and Molly to China for the Department of State exchange we did with them a few years back. So, and I work primarily with promotion of unified sports, whole school engagement in education environments, and youth leadership. So, primarily around Montana.
I'm just going to be kind of flipping through some photos from the trip to Laos as we go through this. But the first question that I'd like to ask, and I'll just open this up for anyone, is why you wanted to participate in this program to begin with. What was appealing about it to you, and what were your goals coming into it?
Me personally, I've kind of done this throughout the United States with different reservations, just sharing what we do, what we know, and learning from other places. And this was just on a way bigger scale, and so that's why it really interested me.
For me, it was a large opportunity to being a part of an organization like Special Olympics International, where we actually work in 170 countries and over 4 million athletes. Laos is one of those countries that has Special Olympics there as well, and it's very interesting to see how our model in the United States is so similar in a place that is so different culturally as well as with the government. So it was definitely a piece for us professionally to see how that volunteer model can work in a country like Laos. And also I think it for us locally, the connection that's made on a professional level with our peers in sports and in recreation and education is pretty impactful. It impacts our program at Special Olympics in a big way. So that was our motivation.
I mean, other than the obvious, like I said, recent grad, so I definitely can't afford trips like this on my own yet, but so getting an opportunity to travel and see different cultures, but experience them and not just like see them from the tourist side of things, but actually be immersed in it and experience it. But then also, I think having an opportunity to really see barriers and see things that work for them, whether it's within the Special Olympics realm or within education and those pieces, I think is pretty impactful moving forward in my personal career.
And then for me, being a faculty at the university, our kind of thing that we do is service, scholarship, and teaching. And so this trip allowed me to actually continue what I've been doing in Asia for quite a while. It started off with wheelchair basketball as a physical therapist and a sports scientist over the last 20 odd years traveling and seeing and doing and participating. And then I spent a year, just 6 years ago, on a faculty exchange in Thailand, and have been taking students back to northern Thailand, again, for both teaching, service, as well as scholarship. And so given my background with adaptive physical education and with the population and my research, which is mostly youth and people with disability and chronic illness related to physical activity and quality of life and health, it was like a really perfect fit. And when I was in Asia, I spent a week in Laos 6 years ago. And as I'm looking ahead to next fall applying for sabbatical, back again going to Southeast Asia, it was a great opportunity to make some really good, strong connections, and as well as just see what we could do. And it is part of what we do as a university, is to reach out beyond the city and beyond the borders of our state and our country, and representing the University of Montana, doing this, sharing our expertise.
Well, I have a strong affinity with Southeast Asia, having been there a number of times, and I saw this as an opportunity to strengthen my connection with that part of the world, but also to, in some of my previous travels, I've done some volunteer work, but it was a chance to travel with more of a purpose, and in doing that, strengthen the connections with people, and really to celebrate similarities and differences, and satisfy my curiosity seeing how people do similar things that I do in another part of the world, and also to share my experience with them, which I think is unique, and certainly is in a place like Laos. But this program really allowed us to, I think, connect on a deep and meaningful level with people, much beyond my previous travel experiences.
I've never traveled internationally before at all, so it was interesting and empowering and amazing and overwhelming to go to a country that was so much different than the U.S. One of the things that I've come to realize about being a person with a disability is that I kind of belong to a culture within a culture, and I was curious how that would translate into like another, physically being in another culture. And turns out we're all family, so it was amazing. It was a really wonderful experience, and I'm glad and grateful that I got to go.
So you all most of you had several months to kind of prepare for this experience and think about what it was going to be like. So I'm curious, once you got there and once you had this experience, how did it meet or maybe overturn your expectations going into it? And if you have a specific experience that you'd like to bring up to exemplify that would be great.
I can start. So like I said, I was there 6 years ago. Laos is a very poor country, landlocked, natural resource rich, but difficult to extract the resources because of the unexploded ordnance, and also a small population. And so when I was there 6 years ago, the capital city, Vientiane, big, relatively big city, big streets, a lot of French colonial buildings, nothing very big there in terms of height of buildings. And so mostly motorcycles, lots and lots of bicycles, and then there were certainly vehicles, and there were plenty of vehicles, but it wasn't congested or busy. It was mostly vehicles of government officials and NGOs. In 6 short years, it has completely changed. There's no bicycles. The traffic, the sidewalks are for parking now. It's like the whole, it has changed dramatically. Big buildings, banks, high rises, the competition between the Chinese and the Vietnamese in particular, but also Japan and South Korea and Thailand for influence and resources. It reminds me a lot of Montana, of that we're natural resource rich and things are being taken, extracted, and then taken out. And so the economic benefits are not necessarily stayed within the country. So it's really, I mean, it's just, that blew me away. Like in terms of, I was preparing for certainly change, because I've seen that in Thailand over the years, but this was radical change in 6 short years.
I was kind of, my expectations for how we would interact with our partners in Laos were definitely exceeded in that we were shown, I felt like we were shown a lot of appreciation and respect and admiration, openness, and so that exceeded the expectations that I had. I perhaps thought people would be more critical, maybe a little bit more shy, more reserved, but didn't find that was the case very often. So.
I think, and these pictures actually bring up a great idea as terms of the power of sport. And so going into it, the power of community and the power of shared experiences was something that was what I anticipated, that people coming together to support community members. And so it wasn't anything that was anything different than what I expected in terms of what we can do when we come together just to experience each other as people. And there wasn't any policy or any agenda. It was just to learn from each other, and that was fantastic. This is a court that we built that I know Shireen brought those, and we played. And there were people we didn't speak the same language, but I'll remember them the rest of my life because we experienced something together, and we built something together. If it's a memory or if it's a physical representation like the court, it was pretty impactful to my spirit as a person and what we do. So I think I'll just reference those great pictures.
Yeah. Do you want to explain a little bit about the activity?
Sure. So the activity we're doing here is a kata, and it is basically foot volleyball. And there's 3 people on a team, and your left is it's a little bit of a combo, I'd say, of soccer and volleyball mixed together. I'm gonna pass this ball around because it's really cool. So I don't know. Here, there's a little one. Sure, that's why you use your feet.
They're bamboo.
They're bamboo, as well. So it was something that you'd probably just never see in the U.S. and it was overwhelmingly fun. It was just a whole pile of fun, and we saw this game being played a couple times as we were driving around, and then we got the chance to play it, and then built the court, and so it was just a really fun cultural experience. And obviously, I brought back some of the balls and hope to play it here in the U.S.
I can go, yes. I think it's pretty similar to what everybody else has said, but I don't think I had expectations going into it because I didn't really know what to expect. I think the biggest piece for me was how easily we were able to build these relationships with people that didn't speak the same language as us. You hear about universal languages and we're taught about universal languages, but then to experience it in a culture that is so not us was so amazing to see. Like Leanne said, we could bring out a ball and everybody knew what to do with it. Or there was a time where we were at a school and Leanne was like waving at kids in the back and they all were copying her, and like it just was this new game, and it was just really beautiful to see those relationships and the play flourish organically, I think, is what really stood out the most to me.
And considering that part of part of what we were doing was eco-diplomacy, I was pretty impressed and surprised to see the amount of environmental consciousness in Laos that I saw. I mean, it wasn't a lot, but there were pieces, there were organizations, there were, we had some of our partners working on water issues and people being aware of where organic farming was going on and wasn't, and I just saw a fair amount of like organic movement, things like that. So kind of exceeded my expectations a little bit on that level.
I think one other kind of learning thing, and I did spend an extra week there after these guys left. I left them at the airport and spent another week working with some NGOs and trying to discover what I could be doing as a faculty member in the future, but visiting university. One, boy, we should never complain about any facilities we have. This university, medical, so it's physical therapy, occupational therapy, prosthetics, was worse shaped physically than any of the rural schools we went to. One faculty member in physical therapy teaching 150 students. It was striking what they didn't have. But talking to the college students, and actually some other students that I talked to, was really interesting, and some of the people that we met, given the political history of Laos, with the French for many years, and then the West and the Americans, and the change from a monarchy to a communist government. I was surprised, just like I was surprised also in Cambodia and Vietnam, about how they have every reason to not be as friendly and kind and supportive as they are of us, with the history that comes with us, the baggage that comes with us. But what they shared, and what I learned a lot, was that they learned the history. I mean, the history is there, of what had happened, but they also learned that that was the past, and that they're moving forward. And I thought that was something that we haven't done very good in this country, and I'm from Canada, and we haven't done very well there. So I think that's like a lesson that we could learn, and that they're actually doing far better than we are, in terms of just letting go of a history, not still recognizing it, it's still there, they're not pretending it didn't happen, but moving forward. And I don't know if other people felt that as well. But
Absolutely.
I mean, I never felt anything but kindness, and that was not just from the people working with us, but just from people that you met in general.
So a large part of your goals for this trip to Laos were facilitating these professional development workshops for your Lao counterparts, so other professionals working in similar areas. And so you really were going into it with this sort of like a teaching role. But I'm curious, I mean, it really was a two-way exchange in a lot of ways, and so this is kind of a follow-up to my previous question, but what were some of the major takeaways or learning experiences that maybe you didn't expect going into it as a facilitator, but that came out of that process in the end?
Some of the local games that the school teachers played with us were a surprise, and how they resembled. So we were sharing games and sports and things we do, and then so we asked people to share some sports and some games that they do. Very much resembled like barbecue drinking games. Don't you think? Some, fun. Everyone could participate. Were games that were like, men, women, children could all be together. I wish we had the pictures. Quite silly. But we had a good time laughing.
So to give you an example of the game, so it's that game where you have maybe 10 or 15 or 20 feet, and you have two bowls of marbles, and you have a spoon in your mouth, and you're competing against somebody else. So you're not allowed to use your hands. You have to scoop up the marble with your spoon, run to the other end, drop it off, and run back. So the way Brett describes them as, what we would use barbecue, camping, birthday party games. We did several of those, and of course the kids, because we were competing against the teachers, and then some of the kids participated too, but the kids at the school just thought it was the funniest thing in the world. I mean, it was pretty good.
Because it was the funniest thing in the world.
I think there's a huge difference between how we see human contact and how they see it. Somebody sitting next to you talking to you will reach over and put their hand on your knee, things like that, or here, it's like, hands on my knee.
No.
But, like even the one game we played was a game where you ran or hopped or whatever with a soccer ball between your legs, but you had to pass it to somebody else, which to us was kind of embarrassing. To them, they're like, hurry up, they wanted to win. But yeah, it was, just that there didn't seem like at all embarrassing to them, but to us it was like, because you're holding the ball between your knees, trying to pass it to someone else between their knees. Really close.
We also learned and maybe somebody else can describe it, but I'll just make this as an example. We also learned what a big wedding is like.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
So maybe if one of you want to share.
No pictures of that.
So if you ever get to go to a Lao wedding, go. It's fun. It's super fun. It seems like kind of in general daily life, it's a population of people that seems very reserved a little bit. keeps your emotion in check, and there's not a lot of super wazoo happy and a lot of super wazoo sad. You know, you might see that on a daily basis in the US, but at a Lao wedding, everybody's excited, everybody's happy. So I think it was an opportunity for them to really express themselves and to have fun, and there was a lot of dancing. There was, it was over 1,000 people at the wedding that we went to. We didn't know, you know, we just were friends of the cousin of the bride, right? So we got invited and we felt like we were as much part of the family as anybody else. There were several tables in this large ballroom. Every table had a bottle of Johnny Walker Black on it, a bunch of beer Laos,
I didn't
sake. So the food was amazing, everything about it. The bride and groom took pictures with every single guest, and when you walked into it, you felt like you were like walking into prom, like what you would be like walking into a prom. Here, there was a flowered arch, and you stop and take pictures with the bride's mom and then the groom's mom and then, you know, everybody. So yeah, it was a joyful experience, and I can only hope that the U.S. should have weddings like that. I want to go to another wedding like that.
Not to mention the best break dancers I've ever seen.
Oh my God, seriously. I think too, in relation to something in the education world that was interesting was when we visited a few primary schools, and we had a chance to visit with educators who are actually in the classrooms and teaching. We purposely structured our workshop opportunities where we got to have table talks or mat chats where it was a couple of us interacting with a couple of them. So it was nice to have that intimate conversation, and those went longer than some of the fun games and some of the other activities we did, because there was that sharing of ideas and that on both ends. And so that was a really great benefit to how we structured it. And one of the pieces that really stuck out to me was just as someone who supports schools around Montana on inclusive school environments, and when we asked them about how students with disabilities and students particularly with intellectual disabilities are taught in their schools, you know, they don't have paraprofessionals like we have in our schools. They don't have those supports or those resources, and so they really depend on peer-to-peer education, where a general education student or a typically developing peer is assisting someone with an intellectual disability, and it's such an interesting concept. It's more out of necessity, you know, we have more resources, but it is also very impactful, and we talk in reverse to our schools about how important peer-to-peer interactions are for everyone. So I think for me that was professionally quite a powerful piece that I walked away with. But those table conversations about opportunity to connect was fantastic, and that's just one example of the 2 weeks.
I think also socially, whereas gay and lesbian relationships are taboo, transgendered is not. And so you know, again, we had the luxury, I don't know, it's a joy to have one of our main interpreters was a woman who's transgendered, and numbers of other people that you would meet. And again, I was experienced this a lot in Thailand because it's very similar, the culture is very similar anyways, but it was just really interesting to see, you know, the discussions we're currently having right now in this country, whereas in Laos, and Lao people, you know, that transgender is not, it's just so different. It's not seen as a taboo in the same way, and it's actually very, you know, the people that we experienced were just integrated well, and there was no animosity.
But we also learned from our translator that a large portion of that population, that group, is still discriminated against. It's difficult to find typical work, and you know, there's still a lot of transgender people that are forced into prostitution because of lack of opportunity. So I mean, but it's changing.
It's changing, yeah. So it's a similarity. Like they're struggling with many of the same issues we are, of course.
So a lot of you have mentioned the connections that you were able to make during your trip. I'm wondering if you could talk about specific individuals that you encountered there, who you made special connections with, and why those connections were so powerful for you.
I had an experience one evening when I was out on my skateboard cruising around the city, and I went by a construction site, and this guy yells at me from the construction site. I stopped, and I look over, and he's working on the ground, and he comes crawling off the construction site with two very skinny legs crossed behind him, and he's dragging his legs. He's clearly disabled, and he spoke a little English, and hey, I used to ride a skateboard, and we start talking, and next thing you know, he jumps on my skateboard. I offered him the skateboard, and I jumped on his crank wheelchair sort of bike mechanism, and Shireen wouldn't call it a bike, of course. But and we went cruise all around the city, and this guy who spoke very little English, and was just working on a construction site and saw me pass by. Next thing you know, we're out. We spent the evening together. We're hanging out. He's on my skateboard. We're talking, to cruise around, talking to people, and and then we went our separate ways. But a surprise connection that for me was somewhat profound. I used to work construction, back in the day, and so we kind of connected on a lot of different levels. This guy, for me, that was very profound. It'll stay with me the rest of my life.
One that was definitely impactful to me was the QLA, which is an organization that we work with that support folks who are impacted by the UXOs, and their executive director is a survivor of a UXO explosion, and it was very interesting to see advocacy in another country, peer-to-peer, and the power of that is universal. And he's very passionate about being out and connecting with rural communities. And I think here in Montana, we can understand and appreciate the challenges of not having technology, not having communication, not having resource in certain rural communities when you go into smaller portions of, and it's only amplified in Laos when there isn't technology readily available. And what he's able to do, one of their initiatives is they were going into villages and teaching first aid, because a lot of the medical care that they get is actually in Thailand. And so it was just interesting that is something that they started, and they started because of impact of the UXOs and not having access to medical care in villages. And it's a very proactive way of dealing with a situation that is their reality. And so I think I've made a good connection with him because of that.
And sorry if I missed this, QLA is the Quality of Life Association. It's an acronym
For me, it'd be the whole group of teachers that we played Native games with. In the Native games, the women are pretty much open to do about anything they want to the men physically, and the men can't do anything back. And these women, they're very reserved over there. They don't, not a lot of noise and things like that. They really got into it. They were throwing me out of the way to get to the ball. I got one picture where a gal's reaching for the ball and elbowing me in the stomach. She had a blast. All of them had a blast playing the games, and they really got into it. And what helped me out was the translator. Was really passionate. I could tell, he's really getting into explaining the games, and so that helps out a lot. But they just got into it. They played it very well. They clearly understood the rules and the intent of the game. They enjoyed it because it talks about equality between men and women. And so they really enjoyed that aspect of the game. So just really got into it.
Can I ask Paul a follow-up question? Mel, I know you're moderating this, but who won that? The men or the women?
Men?
Oh, no. Get out. No.
Usually in these games, it's designed to make it very hard on the men to win. And it's great because, we just had another group. I had another group come and visit, and the women beat the guys like 20 to 3 or something like that. And it's awesome because, it really gives the men a chance to be humble, and they have to play hard to get that 3 points. They have to use the sticks, and a lot of people, if it was in Cherokee country where they play all the time, it would be a lot different. They hit the target a lot more. But a lot of these men in the high schools and things like that, it's their first time using the ball and the sticks, and they really don't stand a chance, but it really helps them understand what the games are about. Especially even, getting your butt kicked by so much, by 20 points or whatever. Kind of, you have to accept it and, be okay with it. Here in the U.S., young men at about 12 to 13, 14 years old really have trouble with that. When they're losing to the girls, they want to change the rules. They want to start pushing the girls and things like that so that they can try to win. But yeah, the women kicked our butt and they had
Thank you.
lost. Oh,
That's all we
not all
wanted,
the
that's all we
games.
wanted to hear.
This game here in particular, they won. But the one in the end, the men won. So.
I was thinking when you asked that question, so probably the most meaningful, and everybody was amazing, but actually it was the week, it was making a relationship to start with, and the week I was there on my own. Again, I'm spending time at the university realizing that this is probably not a place that I'm going to spend a year doing research and teaching for a variety of reasons when they don't do research there. But several of the women, RDA, who was our kind of host,
The Rural Development
Rural Development Agency, how they helped me out the next week on making connections with a number of other NGOs that it turned out that they could be my host, and that the research things and the programmatic things that I'm interested in can be done in a different way. And it was really because of them that we figured that out. So for instance, one project that we're working on is with the BDP, which is the Buddhist Development Program, which is run by monks, and some of the issues of an aging population in an urban setting. Again, they're living longer, but they're also having falls, and the whole family unit is quite different now in terms of support. And so the monks are working or wanting to work more on the spiritual side with aging Lao in terms of being able to let their families go and move on with their own spirituality and that. But I'm also interested in working with an older population in terms of exercise and trying to prevent the falls, or if they have the fall, have the injuries lessened. So we started working on a plan of starting a fitness wellness program at the Wat, which is something that we were doing in Thailand already. And the monks piece of it is that then they have this audience of older Lao, to meet with each week and deal with some of the spiritual issues. So that there's no way that could have happened without the women at RDA making those connections. And so we did a few of those. So I think those, professionally, I think that was a really great connection where I felt like it's something that's going to help me do what I need to do, but it's actually serving a need. Like, it's not something I even thought of. It was, they came up with it. Well, this is what you could do with your experience. And so I thought that was really meaningful to me.
I have one if we have time.
Oh,
Of course.
Okay. I just think that in terms of, we were talking about connections and just how everybody was very connected. One thing that really modeled that to me was our first workshop day in San Quang. We worked with a population who most of them were a survivor of UXO or had a disability in some way, and they're caretakers. And there was a young man who had come who was blind, and his wife had come and brought their baby, and they had been outside, and because the baby was fussy or something, we were like, no, come in. And just to watch them, I mean, he's blind, she couldn't see out of one eye, and they were so open to just handing their child to us, and we didn't speak the same language, and they were just like, yeah, take, you can hold her. And seeing, and everybody in that room, I think, held that baby at some point, and just watching them be so open, and the phrase "it takes a village" really came into effect in those moments. And then watching the rest of the trip, kind of watching how everybody cared for everybody, and it's really a family. Laos was a family.
Mm-hmm. Actually, he was a massage therapist.
Oh yeah.
And we gave him a ride back into town, and of course, he's connected with us and talked with us to some degree. And I happened to be sitting next to him on the van, and all of a sudden, as we said, they're touchy, very close people. But what he's doing all of a sudden is I realize he's massaging my leg and then my shoulder, and going again. His hands are certainly, his disability is beyond just his vision. His hands were quite deformed as well. but I'd gone for a run that day. He found like in seconds exactly where the knot was in my quadriceps, and he worked it right out. And it was just like he just did it like as a thank.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I mean, he just did it because that's what he does. But
And that's just how the whole community was
Yeah.
all the time, was
Yeah.
just so, I don't know.
So she
It was a
like,
family.
Keep on going. Matter of fact, let's switch sides and get the other one.
So I just have one more question before we open it up to the audience for any questions you might have. What are your next steps moving forward? What do you think some of the biggest takeaways are for you, and where do you see yourself going after this first part of the program, either professionally, individually? What are you looking forward to next?
I'm already thinking about going back. But it's now I feel very grateful that we have some friends and partners and contacts there, so that if I do return, I can get involved in more meaningful work, volunteer work. The door is wide open, I think, and we even have people that offered us places to stay upon any potential return. And I have some other connections in Southeast Asia already that I could explore. So now I just feel like it's extra wide open to continue doing good work in other parts of the world.
I think also having them, we have 8 that are going to be coming here, and to like have those experiences here with them. And I know it'll continue to be the two-way exchange, and even though they're on our turf now, like we're going to be learning just as much from them as they're going to be from us, just like it was in Laos. But I'm excited to know that the work, that we started there and that we will continue here is that sustainability piece, and knowing that both what they're teaching us and what we're teaching them is only going to help all of us in our professional careers and moving forward, and making the change and wherever we are, I guess, is what I'm excited about. So.
I just, I like sharing my experience with anybody. I work at the college. People come into the fitness center. They're asking me how my trip went and things like that. Just the differences. I think I have a little bit different opinion than a lot of people on different situations. I wouldn't call a lot of their situations necessarily poverty. Just because they don't go to work and have a job and gets a TV and a 2-story house and stuff like that. What they do is hunt and gather. That's their lifestyle. That's what they do. That's what they have to do. If they don't hunt and gather, there's no other option. You don't survive if you don't get out, hunt, gather, grow your own food. Have your own animals to eat and things, and ways to collect. Their food for the day, anywhere from antlers to different plants, wild plants and stuff. I don't necessarily call that poverty. It's just a different way of living. Just their traditional way of living.
More in touch with the land.
But here in the U.S., what's going on with our government right now, we can talk trash all we want. There, it's not that case. You better not talk trash too loud at all. So just sharing that experience. We're lucky we got what we have. In some ways, I see. Sometimes I think we have too much help for people in certain situations, where these people have no assistance, but yet they survive and thrive. I share my opinions on those with anybody that'll listen. Which in my case can reach quite a few people. So, I like the experience. It was good.
Does anyone from the audience have any questions? Anything you'd like to ask? Yes.
Do the kids in Laos know how to play tag?
Oh yeah, and we played.
Oh yeah.
Triangle tag, not necessarily ever.
We played Fire in the Forest with like 150 kids. That was intense.
Awesome.
There was quite a few attacks.
That got real.
That was an eye-opening experience for me in China, that the kids were so structured and
They
had
were-
no ability to step outside of that.
Ah.
So teaching them tag was a enlightening experience for all of us, for sure.
Yeah, I think that was, it was, even though they're a reserved culture, I think similarly, they break out a little, it's a little less informal, so it was easier for them to break out of that, but, yeah.
Very informal, really.
So,
You mentioned about something about eco-diplomacy. How does the sport diplomacy work with the eco-diplomacy aspect of this program?
it was difficult.
It was kind of I guess it was a minor piece, and
I
we.
would say there's lots of ways to foster an appreciation for the environment, and one of those is through outdoor recreation. Because if you sit inside and learn about stuff on a computer, you're not really experiencing the outdoors. And maybe maybe sports is kind of a backdoor way into that. But now if you love sports and if you're outside and you're having fun, now you see that I need to protect this trail, I need to protect this forest, because if it's gone because they want to go ahead and cut it all down for wood to sell to China, then now I can't go have outdoor recreation here with my friends and family, and it's gone forever. So I feel like there's a strong correlation between sport and the outdoors, for sure.
And we also, even though we didn't do it directly, we participated with RDA and their mission for hygiene and clean water. Again, it's a country, Laos is a country that, again, my world is chronic disease and disability. They certainly have those issues there, but infectious disease is a much more pressing issue. And so even though we didn't directly do things related to clean water and hand washing, we participated in the activities that were happening at the rural school. And so I think, and I don't know, it would be so interesting, like having us being part of that effort to wash hands. I wonder if that is more impactful on the kids or not. You could speculate all you want, I have no idea, but I think that was a piece of it, is that we shared that with RDA and supported RDA in their mission to do that at 2 different schools. I think that was
And
important.
supported them at that event, which
Yes,
we went to
yeah.
an all-day event that was essentially, it was called Youth for Sport and Environment, so it just forced the two things together, really.
It kind of worked. But I think there is a correlation, especially spending some time in metropolitan areas in China. If you don't have clean air, if you don't have resource in the environment, you can't participate in sport if it's recreational or organized. So although it seems a bit disconnected, they really are codependent on each other in order for it to be healthy, for your mind and your body to experience that opportunity to even participate in sport. You need water, you need to be hydrated, you need to be balanced, you need that clean air. So I think for a while I did struggle with that piece as well. It seems a little disjointed, but we also, having Paul in with the Native American Games, there's a large circle of influence there. So I think it was more progressive than we even anticipated, that the connection between it, because if you don't have it, there's just no way to participate in sport. So.
And we did have some speeches, or Mel talked, and she invited me to talk to, and I just expressed the traditional ways of honoring the land and things like that, and then what we currently do on the reservation to keep our water clean and things like that. So we did share things directly to them that we do here.
It's a great question, and we all asked it.
Did you notice in the urban areas any mobility accommodations due to large population of disabled?
That's a really great question. I really missed the little blue sign with the handicap. I saw no sign of that at all, not even a little. I think that I saw 0 people with spinal cord injuries, and in the U.S., my experience is that's probably, I know more people with spinal cord injuries than I do with amputations. So I was immediately concerned about that and wondering about that. I will say that there's some interesting things like there's a ramp on every business for like where you would carry a dolly up, or where you would like bring in supplies or bring your luggage into the hotel. Almost every building we were in like had a little ramp like that. So I thought about that, like maybe there's a way to in the future kind of capitalize on the infrastructure that is in place. But yeah, at the moment it's a city that seems to be being modernized slowly on the crumbling ruins of, of broken infrastructure at this point. There were a lot of really modern buildings next to a vacant building with no power, but you knew people were living there, next to a cute little restaurant, next to an empty lot with huge piles of dirt and broken stuff in it, next to another really modern building. And so it seems like they're really at a transition point right now, and I hope that does become a priority, because yeah, the wheelchair that Brett was talking about, I would call sort of like an urban wheelchair, and it was like.
And that's pretty much all you see. I mean, in terms of, you don't see a lot of people using crutches or wheelchairs, even at, on that level. But you did see a few people. It's that one common crank, three-wheeled chair that you don't see them a lot, but
They
a
were
little
kind
bit.
of homemade, and like they were probably made at the Cope Center, which was a facility there for people with disabilities. We saw where they were manufacturing them, welding them together and stuff. But yeah, I'd really like to see some more progress in that area. Not just Laos, but it seems like Southeast Asia from my research indicates that, yeah, there's not a lot of emphasis on access. But everybody, access is an attitude as far as I'm concerned. Not just the person with the disability, not just their attitude, but the attitude of the people around them. Are they willing to do what it takes to get this person into this business, into this, school, into this, event, or into this place of business or whatever that's going on there. So attitudes are positive. So definitely say the attitude is positive.
Other questions? Thank you so much,
Thanks,
everyone,
Thank
for
you.
sharing your experiences, and thanks everyone for coming.